You're listening to From the Booth on the Night Vision Podcast Network. From the Booth is our first foray into podcasting. I'm Ryan Riebenecker, your co-host and the sports director of KWAR, Wartburg's radio station. Joining me is fellow co-host Annika Wall, the sports editor for the Wartburg Trumpet, and the lead sports anchor for Cedar Valley Today. Both of us also announce almost every sport for Night Vision, hence the name From the Booth. In this week's edition, we'll be breaking down everything Wartburg softball and baseball with fellow sports journalist and radio announcer John Mowinkle. This is From the Booth.
Wartburg has been great from the free throw line. 11 for 13, I believe, just under 85%.
Knights fans, you now have a new Tech Falls career record holder in Cross Canone.
But he is going after it.
Going inside here, put back up and in, that time by Connor Schultz.
Kicking off with today's icebreaker topic, our special guest host for this week's edition of From the Booth, John Mowinkle, the current sports director for KWAR, a job that I'll be filling next year. Since you're a senior, you'll be gone. Our icebreaker, though, you're in the job hummer right now, and fill us in on how that's going.
Yeah, so I got a few different options here coming my way. I'll be having to weigh those options here pretty soon. So option number one right now for me is going to be to stay near my hometown. I work at a group of radio stations in Hampton, Iowa, where I have actually worked the past 6 years in a part-time capacity. There's an opening for a sports broadcasting position there. So that is definitely a possibility as well, though I do want to get out of the area.
Yeah.
I mean, I love where I'm from. I mean, that's not the thing. I feel like I should get out and experience, different parts of not only the world, but, just the Midwest, Iowa, that type of thing.
Right.
I've been talking with this place up in northern Minnesota called R&J Broadcasting, and so there were 56 people that applied to this sports/sales position up there. And so the boss up there calls and tells me this, we got 56 people. And I was like, okay, well, I'm probably not going to make the cut. And he's like, yeah, but we're gonna cut it down to 20, then 10, and then have the final 5 people in for an in-person interview. And I can guarantee you'll be in the top 20. So I'm like, oh, okay. So that's pretty cool. He liked my resume, apparently.
I imagine how intense the vetting process must be when you have 56 applicants.
Yeah.
It's crazy competitive.
And he said that there were people ranging from people my age, straight out of college, and veterans of the industry as well, applying for that job. So I figured, well, all those more experienced guys will probably get the nod. And so anyway, we go through another round of interviewing just over the phone. I make it to the top 10. That's pretty cool. We do a Skype interview, and after that Skype interview, I was feeling kind of 50-50 on how well I did. I wasn't too sure I'd probably make them to the top 5. But then the next day, I get an email saying, hey, we want you up here in person for an interview. So I'm just like, all right, that's cool. So I get one of those scheduled and going up there next Thursday. And it's about a 7-hour drive up there. I'm not saying that I would be opposed to moving that far from home. However, a new opportunity has recently come up. KNIA and KRLS in Knoxville, Iowa. 2 radio stations down there, though they run some other stuff through their website. They have some FM translators. So they actually have about 4 or 5 different sports crews. And I talked to the manager on the phone yesterday, and he would be interested in having me down there. So I'm going down there for an interview on Saturday. And that looks like it's a pretty good company. It would be a pretty good company to work for. Knoxville's a pretty nice community.
But over there, you'd be covering the Central Dutch,
right?
Which would effectively make you a traitor.
It would,
and we would have to hate you and announce against you, and we don't want to do that.
That would be quite something. I've thought about that. And here's the thing: I can't speculate too much.
No,
over the phone, it sounds like it'd be an awesome opportunity. Which I'm sure it probably will be. I just I got to go down there, check it out, talk to the management, see the place, and all that.
And especially
stuff.
at this stage in your career, looking at new jobs, even if there's stuff that you don't feel is super attractive, it's absolutely in your best interest to try to explore those opportunities anyway.
Yeah.
And give yourself the experience of all those interviews and seeing what you're worth from other radio stations so that you know what you probably are estimated to be worth.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And originally I really had no intentions of accepting the job up in Minnesota. I'm just going there for the interview, practice, interview experience. So, yeah, I mean, and I guess if they absolutely blow me away, then I'll have to, maybe put some more thought into it. But as of now, I have a few options that are available to me. One job offer for sure, and that's in Hampton.
Right.
And then it's sounding like it's pretty likely I'll be offered the job down in Knoxville. Of course, like I said, you can't speculate anything, but, I mean, based on what he said that he would likely offer me the job. And then I'm one of 5 applicants up the place in Minnesota, so we'll see how that goes.
I didn't know the Knoxville job had turned that corner. That's great.
Yeah, and over the phone, too, just based on
and the
my
fact
resume.
That they reached out to you first
right.
to invite you to apply is really, really cool.
And so that was because I applied for a job at KCII Radio in Washington, Iowa. And
same company.
So the same company owns the Washington station as the Knoxville stations.
Okay.
So my resume was in there within their management, people. So that's how they found me, which I thought was pretty cool to be sought out for an opportunity like that. So
absolutely. Even this young sports broadcasters can still get their opportunities.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Here's another question for you. Just what a lot of viewers might be thinking. Your voice is really, really deep for someone as young as you are.
I've heard. Yeah.
Have you trained your voice to be that way, or is it just 100% natural?
I mean, yeah, it's natural. I mean, yeah, that's tough because. They're like growing up.
Are you taking
kind of just
broadcast performance enhancers?
No, I remember like back in the day, I just playing around with my voice, like seeing like doing I don't know, just weird stuff like that like a 10, 12-year-old would do. I don't know if it made any difference. I don't know. My dad has a pretty deep voice too, so that's probably where I got it from. So I don't know.
You have the natural talent that a broadcaster's voice would want to have.
I was a bass 2 in 7th grade.
Oh man.
Yeah.
That says something,
yeah.
though.
That's pretty crazy.
Right.
Growing up, this is getting to be a long icebreaker, but just to familiarize our audience with you a little bit more, since this is this is your first appearance on the podcast, though it is the second episode. It's not like you've been behind the curve.
Right.
But growing up, announcing, broadcasting is kind of what you wanted to do.
Yeah. So. Growing up, I think the biggest reason that I wanted to get into sportscasting is because I come from a farm family, and that alone isn't necessarily why. But so growing up, when I was like 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, that type of age range.
Yep.
I'd ride with my dad in the combine during the fall when we were like harvesting corn, beans, because that's what we raise.
That's the life.
Yeah, that's the life for a rural Iowan. But anyway, so Saturdays during the fall, we'd have Iowa Hawkeye football on the radio in the combine, and for whatever reason, that just sparked some sort of interest in me, and I just thought that was so cool, and it made me think that that's something that I could do, and so. Yeah, among other factors, but definitely that's a big influence. And Gary Dolphin.
Growing up around Gary Dolphin.
Gary Dolphin, listening to him, and, oh, God, he's so good at what he does. I mean, so I'd say that's one of the biggest inspirations is listening to Hawkeye football on the radio. Got a few different chances to actually meet Gary Dolphin a couple different times in my life. I met him at a broadcasting conference down at UNI one time when I was in high school. Let's see. And after that, he actually sent me an invite to come sit in the press box for a football game. So that was amazing. I don't know if you had known that before this podcast.
We've talked about it here and there.
But yeah, so I got to sit up in the radio booth in Kinnick Stadium for a game, which was awesome.
Yeah.
Sitting in there with Gary Dolphin, Ed Podolak. Anyway, that's getting kind of off topic. But
but a very good crew and pretty good role models to have. I think it's just interesting to bring up that this has been your dream for a long time.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And also I was blessed with an opportunity when I was a sophomore in high school. I had the opportunity to start working in Hampton, where I currently work now.
Yeah.
And so that just kind of got me into the industry, and it made me decide that's something that I could legitimately pursue as a career. So yeah, that opportunity has been amazing. The opportunities I've had here at Wartburg are invaluable. I mean, from getting to broadcast a ton of different athletic events, not only home games, getting to do road trips, and just the road trips in general are fun. Obviously, I mean, doing the games is fun too, but like just the camaraderie with your friends and colleagues that you go on the road trips with. I mean, my time here doing that stuff at Wartburg has been an absolute blast. I'm going to miss it, but at the same time, it is time to move on and start life in the real world.
Got to close the yearbook.
That is what they say.
All right, let's move on now to softball. Pretty much the big Wartburg topic going on right now. We've been hustling for more and more softball content as the week has gone on, just prepping for this show. So the softball team was given an at-large bid and made it to the conference tournament for the first time since 2009. That's a 10-year drought. All of this happening after they were preseason picked to finish 8th in the conference. Wound up finishing 3rd, lost in the first round, and still got an at-large bid to the tournament. Kind of crazy. I think we did not expect that at all, to say the least. But what were your reactions to this news?
Well, I mean, I've been talking a lot. Do you want to talk?
I mean, I really don't care. It was just extremely surprising considering they did get beat in the first round to Simpson, a team that they had split with in the regular season.
Yeah.
But if you look at the teams that they had beat throughout the season, it does make sense to give them an at-large bid, even though you can speculate where exactly they fall. They've beat ranked teams pretty handily, almost, if you think about it. I believe it was UW Oshkosh they beat pretty solidly themselves.
Yeah, so UW Oshkosh, Wartburg, they run-ruled UW Oshkosh 13-3-5 and 11-3-5. So yeah, that's pretty good accomplishment there. And another thing, I guess, big picture too, just with this program, best season so far in the Jamie Mueller area, which is in its 4th year now. But I was looking through the past schedules here in this last decade. Again, it is the first tournament appearance since 2009. But just where this program has been, like in this decade, back in 2013, they finished 4-30 on the season. Back in 2012, they finished 6-34. And yeah, it's been several years ago at this point.
Yeah.
But for a program like that, to make a turnaround like that, I mean, it just speaks volumes to, the type of culture change that has happened within that softball program. And like you were mentioning, with a 26-12 overall record, and losing in the first round of the conference tournament, a shock. But at the same time, I think it's definitely going to be a good building block for this program heading into future years. Now that they know that, yes, they can make the tournament, that it's going to be a good momentum builder for the future seasons with this group they got coming up.
Definitely. And you mentioned a culture change. I know it's only been 4 years since Jamie Mueller took over the team, but you're looking at the sheer amount of stolen bases and the pressure they put on the defense. They aren't relying on long ball anymore, and honestly, I think that's probably been the largest factor in their success. Yeah,
the game's changing. Mueller came in, she started embracing it right away, and she's had a dynamic effect on the team. And needless to say, Wartburg softball fans are a lot happier now than they've probably been in a long time. 10 years, the stats say, is how happy they should be. Let's look now, as they are currently, as we record this, they are still in NCAA tournament action. Who knows if that'll still be the case by the time this is released on Saturday. We are recording this. Currently, it's 5 o'clock Thursday evening, so a lot of stuff sure to transpire before all of that. Stay tuned to Wartburg Athletics to keep you up to date with all the information as to what's going on. But let's talk briefly about this senior class and the impact they had. A lot of seniors, really, really good names to bring up in Kailee O'Brien, Roby, Miklus, a few of which we reached out to even have them come in for the podcast. But with how busy they are with the tournament, they weren't able to make it in. But best of luck to them while they're there. Annika, you want to talk about these seniors?
These seniors, I believe there's 8 of them. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yep, there's 8 of them. 8. So they've been really the first Jamie Mueller class. As we said, she's been here 4 years now. Yeah. So they came in recruited under an entirely different coach and kind of came in not really knowing what exactly was going to transpire. But you look at, obviously, the first 2 that come to mind, senior outfielders, Roby, Miklus, Kailee O'Brien. O'Brien has been a 4-team, second-team all-conference selection ever since she stepped foot at Wartburg to now. And then Roby Miklus is actually the career and single-season record holder in stolen bases. I believe O'Brien is third on that list as well. O'Brien is also on a list for hits. So definitely some interesting stuff to look at, just the impact that these seniors have had on the program. Also, not one to knock, Hannah Onken. She's also on the school record boards for career in single double plays turned as a first baseman.
Yeah.
So just the sheer impact that these 3 and obviously all 8 just in making the culture. Also have to look at Brenna Gray on the pitcher's mound behind Maddie Rogg, the conference pitcher of the year, only a sophomore.
We'll talk about that shortly.
Yes. But Brenna, even coming back from shoulder surgery, has done a great job. So just these 8 and really in creating a culture and something that people want to come into. It's huge if you want to build Wartburg softball back up to what it has been.
Totally agree. You referenced the all-conference results. They came out just shortly. We're super pumped about it. But as you said, Rogg did tie for Pitcher of the Year. There was a 3-way tie for that role just this season. Not something that's very common, but they felt like there was enough talent at the top to warrant that. Also, some other shout-outs. First team, we had one selected. Illig got that nod, our shortstop. O'Brien, Campos, and Stokes also got second team. No honorable mentions, but I think a better showing than we probably thought Wartburg softball would have at the beginning of the season when it comes to all-conference awards. Certainly overplayed their hand, I think, and put together a really nice season. Moving on now to a different and more fun segment for us, certainly. We just talked about the impact of the senior class and all the ways they've affected Wartburg softball over the past 4 years. Let's look now at what Wartburg softball fans have to look forward to in the years to come, and that's who we think are going to be the best fielding returners for the Wartburg softball team. Looking up and down this list, there's a lot of really good names, but let's start off with you again, Annika. You put in a lot of work with the stats on this, so talk about who's your favorite and why.
So softball all-conference is different from you're looking at your volleyballs, your basketballs, because they go by position. So you obviously have to take that into account. When you're on first team, you might not necessarily be one of the best players in the conference, but typically you are the best player at that position. So just kind of starting off with that. And quite frankly, I'm excited to see what Olivia Brecht does going into the rest of her season. I remember watching her play. She actually went to Center Point, Urbana. So I remember seeing her at tournaments and just seeing how good that culture was, and seeing her here has been even better. Currently on the Wartburg team, as of now, recording of this podcast, her batting average was 374, so 5th on the team overall.
Very good.
Fielding percentage of just over 95%. Slugging, on-base percentage, both very good. And even though she might have been, I don't know necessarily snubbed, but she was not awarded anything from the all-conference, it's worth noting that she is a first year, she's a second baseman. Very important position.
Well, and you can't just chalk up the slugging and on-base percentage to very good. It's really, really good. Her slugging is at a 58.9, which is sensational. On-base percentage at a 47. I mean, she put together a really, really good season. And I think you mentioned earlier in the day as well that she changed positions some as a first year. Did you not say?
No, it was actually Sydney Illig.
Sydney Illig did that.
Sydney was a second baseman her senior year.
All right. And she's
now
a shortstop currently. Well, I guess that I'll go into my pick then, because I was going to actually talk about Sydney Illig. I think she did a really good job at the shortstop this year. Fielding percentage wasn't as high as you'd want it to be, but clearly when it came to all-conference honors, they saw a lot of potential in her and a lot more skill beyond just the stats, as she was selected to the first team overall. Batting average was 3rd on the team at a 40.3% batting average. That's 3rd on the team. Fielding dropped down to a 90.3%. That's not great. It's not terrible. Certainly you'd want better from your shortstop, but it's everything else that's really driving her into a really dynamic position. She's at 65% slugging, 46% on base percentage. She's just a really, really good hitter, and her shortstop work is enough to really keep her in that conversation, I think.
Definitely, and she's getting a lot of opportunities as a shortstop too, which is something that you don't necessarily think of. She might have had the lowest fielding percentage of all the Wartburg starters, but she's getting so many more opportunities.
Now, JMO, what is your thought process on this? Who are you looking forward to the most?
Well, I'm going to go with a little bit of a dark horse here. I'm going to go with Leah Campos, 3rd baseman here this year. Only a sophomore, and she played in 36 of the games this year. So far, that's all but one. Started 34. So for a sophomore, that's definitely not too bad to get the starting nod in all those games. 6th on the team in batting average. And, of course, with so 369 is her average. And when you're behind people such as Kailee O'Brien, Liz Roby Miklus, To be sixth and still have a pretty decent average of 369, that's pretty solid.
Not too shabby.
And the 913 fielding percentage for a third baseman having to make those throws over to first. She's got a strong arm to get all those putouts, and her slugging percentage of 553 is among the best of the Knights that are going to be returning next season, as well as a decent percentage of on-base percentage. And being a sophomore, she's had some time to grow, throughout her last 2 years here in the program. And once you get to your junior and senior seasons, that's when you just let it all hang out and let your talents shine. And
she's going to have a big role next year.
Yeah, well, and
to say the least,
she's going to, being a junior next year. Yeah, I mean, not necessarily going to be the leaders, but but
there are too many good players on this team to really speculate.
She'll be an example setter. That's a good way to say. And to have such a key role in this year's NCAA tournament team, and having that coming back is definitely going to be good for the program. And fun stat here, courtesy of Annika Wall: 38 runs scored off of 21 hits. So that is definitely not too shabby. She's pretty good at getting herself on base. So
yeah, and all the way to home. Some other honorable mentions that none of us picked, but certainly deserve a shout-out. Madison Stokes out in the outfield had a really sensational year as an outfielder, fielding 96%. Can't turn your nose up at that. Grace Peterson, also a pretty good year at the catcher spot. And then Jenna Levine with a fielding percentage of 99 at first base. That's a rock.
Only one error.
Only one error.
Her entire season.
That's
as a
great.
First year.
Wow.
Is she typically the starting first baseman? I don't believe she is she?
Her and Hannah On can go back and forth.
Okay.
It just depends on the lineup, but when she's not in the field, she'll be the designated hitter.
All right. Yeah, I was more accustomed to Onken at first base. Then just kind of ending off our softball conversation, because there's so much to talk about, but Annika, you wanted to talk about just the sheer number of softball school records that were dismantled this season.
It has been insane. You're looking at Roby Miklus. She, as I mentioned earlier, both the single season and career stolen base records. As of prior to the NCAA tournament, she had 115 career and 51 just in this season. So definitely nothing to turn your nose up at. Roby Miklus also ranks 4th in runs and 9th in hits, whereas O'Brien is 3rd in stolen bases and 4th in hits. And Lauren Reichs, actually the, not reserve pitcher, but she comes in relief, that's the word, relief pitcher. She's the all-time leader with 10 career saves and is tied for first 2 times because she's had 5 saves her 2 seasons here, so it's definitely interesting. Sydney Illig is 5th in stolen bases. O'Brien is 6th when it comes to single season. And then Olivia Brecht is tied for 4th in single-season doubles. Illig, again, ranked 9th in single-season RBIs. And then as a team, overall, Wartburg has set the school record in on-base percentage, stolen bases, and saves. So it's just been a great season so far, one that the Knights are arguably very happy about.
And those stats, those team stats that you just brought up, are probably the biggest indicator of how much of an effect Coach Mueller had to turn this into a small ball softball program.
Yes.
Through and through.
And you say arguably.
It has to be.
Yeah, I mean, what's there to argue? I mean, it's a good season. They made the NCAA tournament unexpectedly.
Right.
So yeah, that's a good season.
Yeah.
Unarguably.
Here's something completely unscripted, but why do you think they were picked to finish 8th in the conference? It felt like that wasn't likely here at Wartburg. I don't know what perspective could have drove the other coaches to think that way. I know we've talked a little bit about pitching and maybe not having the most secure returners in that, but what do you think changed, and how did Wartburg overachieve this much?
My guess is it probably had to be pitching. Quite frankly, we were relying on first-year pitchers through and through all last year, and it doesn't really matter how good you are in high school. College is an entirely different level.
A little bit.
Quite frankly. It doesn't matter if you went to a 5A or a 1A school. I'm just talking Iowa right here.
Yeah.
No matter what, it's a step up. Unless you're going to a bad softball school. Let's be real.
Yeah.
Anyways, my guess is you don't really know what these girls are putting in the off season. You don't know how many are returning, how many are quitting, what they're doing. Brenna Gray returning from a shoulder surgery. So there's just a lot of factors, and I think those what-ifs were probably what drove them to not rank as high in the preseason.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as a coach, when you're voting that preseason poll, like you said, when there's so many of those unknowns, you kind of just have to assume, that especially since they finished 8th last year in the conference, and they were picked to finish 8th again this year with that mark of, I believe it was 5-11 they finished with last year. So, I guess just reiterating the fact that there were so many unknowns and the fact that, that doesn't give anyone any sort of confidence in their abilities, but they definitely proved those other coaches wrong that voted in that preseason poll.
For sure. And, a really, really good season for them, going all the way to 3rd once again in the conference standings, fighting their way up there. Struggled with consistency at points, but they showed flashes that were so good that it bought them an at-large bid into the NCAA tournament. And that's really the story of the season for the Wartburg softball team. Gosh, hope it doesn't come to an end too soon.
Definitely.
Turning sights now to baseball. Their season's over, but we got to talk about them still because there's plenty left unsaid after last week's episode of From the Booth. So season ended after losing the series that we alluded to last week against Loris 2-1. That one was a fight for the 6th seed in the conference tournament. You just had to win that series and you were in, and Loris is the team that got it done. Wartburg couldn't quite do it, so no conference tournament appearance for the baseball team this season, and wow, that was hugely disappointing, but still a huge story for the Wartburg Knights. It was Coach Holst's first time as a coach not making it to the conference tournament in near to 30 years.
Ever since the conference tournament had been a thing, he had made it.
That is the most unreal stat. Certainly a tough spot for Coach Holst. Alluding to next week, we are lining up an interview with Coach Holst, likely to be our special guest for next week. So be sure to tune into that. He'll have a lot to say about the Wartburg baseball season. Hopefully we can wrangle him in. But yeah, it's got to be a really tough situation. Coach Holst coaching at Wartburg for the past 24 years. This was his 24th, right?
24, 25, somewhere in that range.
And all of them had made it to the conference tournament. And this year, a lot of problems getting there. This team was voted to finish 3rd in the conference preseason, but really could not live up to those expectations, falling short of that 6th seed, like we said. That ends the careers of their seniors, Bo Greenlee, Robert Primrose, Seth Jobes-Ryan, and Colby Hansen. But yeah, really tough time for Coach Holst.
Definitely, and it's also worth noting that as much as those seniors did, they weren't starters. So you also have to look at what they'll be returning next year, and hopefully they can figure it out, quite frankly. It's not fun to watch a baseball game when your team isn't winning.
All right, so let's flip that softball game that we played earlier, our favorite returners going forward, just to add a spin of optimism to this baseball team because it's still got plenty.
Yes.
It's got plenty of young talent, and we'll see what recruiting classes look like next year. We'll see how the batting order looks up because it was absolutely bonkers this season, to say the least. But a lot of returners to be excited about. I believe we singled out only freshmen for this one, right?
Yes.
Mainly just to take JoJo McNair off the board because he'll be going into his junior season, and if it was JoJo, we'd all just pick JoJo because he's
JoJo.
flat out a dynamic player. So out of this list, we got quite a few pretty talented freshmen to single out. Aaron Ibers, Max Goodhue, Bryce Butler, and Jared Harris. I believe all of them made appearances, if not at the top of the batting order at one point this season, close to. I know Aaron Ibers did bat at one point. I don't believe he got close, but Max Goodhue did. I believe Bryce Butler did, and Jared Harris was up towards the top multiple times. So all of them did quite a lot while they were up there. This is not really a stat thing. I'll go first with my pick. It was more of an eye thing, and I really liked what Aaron Ibers brought to the table. As a really, really good relief pitcher, Annika, you and I announced a lot of baseball games this season. First time Night Vision ever was able to broadcast live baseball and softball games. Pretty huge opportunity, but it enlightened us a lot on what these teams could do, and we're thankful for that. So Aaron Ibers had an ERA of 3.86 as kind of the relief pitcher, but not a tremendous ERA, especially considering how many innings he would pitch. He's not a high volume pitcher. He's not likely to pitch 7 innings in any given game. He's typically a guy that you sub in like the 6th, 7th, 8th when your ace is starting to wear off. But simply the eye test in some of the biggest games of the season to lock down games in the 8th and 9th inning and not give up runs when it was really important to do that. As a freshman, I'm really excited for his potential, even though the stats might not back it up right now.
Definitely, I can see that. He carries himself as a more seasoned pitcher than we know he is, quite frankly.
Yeah, he doesn't look like a first year.
He doesn't. You watch him on the mound, he'll strike out 2 runners back-to-back, runners on second and third.
Iber's complete stats, once again, the ERA at 3.86, batting average a dismal 16.7%.
In minimal opportunities, though.
Very
he didn't
minimal.
bat a lot.
Yeah, so don't hold that against him too much. Again, he's a pitcher. He's not too much of a hitter. He just, that's a byproduct of Coach Holst experimenting with his lineup when stuff wasn't clicking. Fielding percentage of 94%. That's pretty good for a pitcher. You're never going to complain when you have close to a 95% fielding percentage. Slugging only a 16.7%, exact same as his batting average. On-base percentage of 28.6%. Once again, not a dynamic offensive player. He strives on the mound, and really going to be interesting to see how his promise might be able to develop over the next couple of years. So an interesting returner to keep an eye on.
Definitely.
Who wants to go next?
I can go ahead.
All right.
So I'm going to go with Max Goodhue. And while he didn't see a whole lot of playing time this year, he did show good promise in his first season of the Wartburg program. He appeared in 13 games. He did get 9 starts, so they're getting him in there to get some starting experience because they're expecting him to be a key man in the lineup not only next year but in years to come. Despite that, though, he was able to accumulate the 3rd best batting average on the team with 306, and here he's got a pretty good consistency with the fielding percentage. He only got 16 chances to field a ball, but he
made the most of it.
Yeah. So that's the best way to say it. Well, a fielding percentage of 1,000. He did not commit a single error.
Perfect.
A single fielding error,
And when you're in the outfield, you shouldn't be making
No,
silly
you
errors.
shouldn't, but,
it happens.
You see them. Yeah, it's not impossible. So
all the time.
Yeah, so so Max Goodhue just has exhibited a lot of consistency across the board here, especially in that fielding percentage. I mean, you can't expect him to be 100% the whole way through.
Yeah.
But definitely a good sign there. And if he just keeps on working on that batting average, should be a good man to turn to in the lineup alongside, of course, JoJo McNair. But everyone knows the story about that.
Yeah, and McNair was kind of unseated from his spot at the top of the batting order later on in the season as they were trying to experiment more with youth. JoJo wasn't hitting as well. I mean, he's a stolen base monster. He knows how to carve his way up the base paths, but it's tough to get him on first. And Max, for a while there, made an appearance towards the top of the batting order. I believe he was one in a couple different games towards the end of the season, and maintaining that high batting average with a fresh pitcher right on you, that's pretty impressive. So maybe more than that stat even suggests, I'd have to say. A lot of promise in Max Goodhue.
Definitely.
All right, Annika, you're up.
I went in here thinking I was going to go with Bryce Butler. He's been a solid third baseman.
Okay.
I personally like how he plays, but once you look at the stats, I mean, obviously you could go with the eye test as Ryan did, quite frankly.
You got to weigh both.
Right, there's nothing wrong with the eye test. But when you compare Bryce Butler and Jared Harris, our second baseman, the stats just have to go with Jared Harris. He bats better, he fields better slugging, better on base. There's nothing that Jared Harris or that Bryce Butler does that Jared Harris doesn't do better, quite frankly.
Okay.
And you also have to look at Harris. He was a shortstop in high school, transitioning over to second base due to Parker Ridge. I mean, Holst has said that he's one of the best defensive players he's ever coached, and quite frankly, Holst has coached for a long time. That's not That's not something you just turn your nose up at and say he's just saying it to say it.
Well, and there are other reasons that he could be saying it in the sense of giving his player confidence.
Right.
You never know. We've had the same kind of situation. I've talked to Bob Amesbury about Tori Hazard in the past as well. She'll be going into her junior season next season with the Wartburg women's basketball team. But he also said she's probably the most athletic player he's ever coached and one of the best passers he's ever coached. The stats didn't really live up to that. But not to say that he's lying, but it's also a tactic where the coach can say something like that, and you have this young player hearing it, and the coach is saying this to the public unprompted. He doesn't have any need to say this. It can imbue a lot of confidence in your athletes.
Definitely. And also, I mean, I remember watching Parker Ridge. He'll go and lay out for balls out in the outfield.
Yeah.
So he
As
puts
a
in the
shortstop,
effort.
that's impressive.
I love that.
Yes.
Definitely favorite thing to watch about Parker Ridge.
But back to Jared Harris.
Yes, but looking at Jared Harris, in 123 chances, he only had 3 errors. And I probably take fielding percentage into account more than batting, quite frankly, because yes, you need to score, but you also need to prevent the other team from scoring. So that's probably my stat that I look at the most and take the most into account. He's the one who really stepped up to that. Max Goodhue, as we mentioned, perfect fielding percentage, but only in 16 chances. He might have made the most of it, but Jared Harris also did very well from second base.
I have to agree with you. Also, it's worth noting some sophomores and juniors that will be returning next season outside of our exciting freshman prospects. Of course, Tyler Nunemaker, Tyler Hovick, the two Tylers. JoJo McNair, talked about him a little bit. Parker Ridge, talked about him as well. Manny Jeffrey, didn't get a chance to talk about him, also a dynamic player. Joey Bauman returning at catcher, and Colin Gwynn looking to be a reliable pitcher option. Or not, he does not
First
pitch.
base.
He's first base, that's right. So a lot of pretty interesting prospects for the baseball team to look at going into the future, but that's going to wrap it up for this segment. Say goodbye to John Mowinkle. Thanks for coming in and being a guest host, Jamie.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a pleasure being here, and looking forward to listening to the podcast throughout its existence, I guess I'll say.
Yeah, happy to have you. Good luck with the job hunt.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Transitioning now into the later stages of our podcast, looking at our Athlete of the Week segment. Annika, that is your decision on who you feel are the best performing male and female Wartburg athletes of the week, obviously. So go ahead and tell us your picks.
So for female, I have to go with Roby Miklus. She's had a great career here at Wartburg. She's arguably the queen of stolen bases. She has that record in both career and single season. I'd like to know if she personally has single game, but definitely something I have to look into in the future. But quite frankly, she had a great showing while the women were off competing in the postseason on that at-large bid. So definitely, she's one of the main reasons, quite frankly. She's a terror on the base path. She's good out in center field. She's a really good player, quite frankly. And then on the men's side, since kind of all the other men's sports have died down, I have to go with the track and field athletes. So definitely makes the pool a little bit smaller, but nevertheless still have an extremely good pick in Dennison Harrington. Mm-hmm. Earlier this morning, he actually led the men's 4x1 team to a conference championship and also qualified for the finals in both the 1 and the 2, while as of taping, the results haven't came in yet, hasn't ran yet. It's still worth noting. And quite frankly, he also has the school record for the indoor 60-meter dash. So definitely not just he's not a one-time showing.
And another Wartburg athlete that's impressing this spring that's also on the football team.
Yes, definitely.
Joining JoJo McNair.
Both. There's a lot of similarities between Dennison Harrington and JoJo McNair, though, quite frankly. They're both extremely fast.
Yeah.
And you see how they play.
Really good athletes.
Quite frankly.
Yeah, they play similarly.
Their athleticism transcends even their abilities, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Honestly.
That's a good problem to have, too, because then you can just train your abilities to catch up, and no one can really reach your ceiling.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's just what you start with.
Right. They have some good genes. I'll just leave it at that.
Good genes,
frankly.
But not to chalk it all up to pure luck and genetics. I mean, obviously they've worked very hard working up their athleticism, their bodies, their physique. They've done a very good job with it. Moving on now, unfortunately, a softball season wrap-up, since this segment was recorded right before the posting of the podcast. In order to get our listeners the best possible softball coverage, the Wartburg softball season is officially over after dropping its second of 3 games in the NCAA tournament. The news breaking just recently. So the Wartburg softball season, again, it's over. But Annika, upon hearing the news, I really wasn't too saddened by it because at the end of the day, I feel like when you're voted to finish 8th in your conference and you manage to make it in the NCAA tournament at all, even if it wasn't an at-large bid, I mean, it doesn't even matter how far you go. I just feel like the accomplishment was already set.
Exactly, and I have to agree with you, quite frankly, Ryan. This was the first time they've made the NCAA tournament in 10 years.
Yeah.
So it was a huge drought, and quite frankly, any bid at all is always, it's huge, quite frankly, especially with a program that hasn't had the same success that it's really hoped for the past decade. Quite frankly, that's just, again, it's a victory. Even though you can also make an argument they lost in the first round of the ARC tournament, why are they getting these bids? But again, it's an argument we've dished out.
Yeah.
They've beaten so many ranked teams. They beat Luther, which is huge, considering they were a top 8 team last year. There's just a lot of factors, but overall, definitely a very successful season.
And the loss now officially ending the careers of Roby Miklus and Kailee O'Brien, tops in the batting order. Roby Miklus at 1, O'Brien at 2, pretty consistently across their entire final season, at least for Wartburg softball. You and I have debated pretty heavily over who we think is better in a couple different occasions, and I'm the first to admit that the athlete that I've had the most contact with, that I've worked with the most, is typically the one that I go with because I can speak to their character, and usually I have a lot of good things to say. And that is the case with Liz Roby Miklus. I think she's very entertaining to talk to. She knows how to make you laugh. You've interviewed her too, actually.
Yes.
She just has some very nice personable qualities, but I'm going to take her side on this one. Both of them are pretty prototypical slappers. Roby Miklus, though, is the leadoff, and I think there's a reason for that. There's a reason she sees the plate first, and as soon as she can get on first base, she's a terror trying to stop her from stealing. There's a reason she's the better base stealer. That's another way she's more valuable to her team. Do you disagree?
I wouldn't say better, because when you're the leadoff, you have more opportunities to steal. Because let's say...
Why are they giving her more opportunities to steal?
I haven't seen her hit for power. I've seen Kailee as a slapper slap for power.
She does have that ability.
She does. And I've seen Liz try, and sometimes she gets on, sometimes she doesn't. But her bread and butter is in the bunt.
Why do you think O'Brien is better?
Because she has more tricks up her sleeve, quite frankly. You see her bunt, you see her slap for power. I've seen her make some great catches out in the outfield. Not saying... And again, that's just games I've been to. Kailee has left a more lasting impression on me, quite frankly. And it also helps that, again, I don't know how long Kaylee's been slapping, but Liz switched to be a slapper when she came to college. I don't know if Kailee was a slapper all through high school, and whether that's the reason she has more tricks up her sleeve, quite frankly. But it's hard to switch, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you feel like one has more tricks up their sleeve, why isn't O'Brien the leadoff batter?
Because... Okay. Pause. Because O'Brien can hit for power, whereas Roby Miklus, I haven't seen that side of her. So if Roby Miklus gets on, you have the possibility of O'Brien either bunting her over as a sacrifice or hitting for power and getting her around the bases.
Okay.
If you were to switch those, O'Brien can do either. I just haven't seen that side out of Liz.
True.
Plus, I think Liz is a little bit faster on the base paths.
She's definitely faster on the base paths.
So that's also a huge part in it, quite frankly, on why they're the leadoff.
Both of them very useful in different ways.
Yes.
Well, similar ways. They do the same thing, but they do it differently enough that it's...
Yes.
I mean, very similar play styles.
But the other thing, going back to stolen bases, when, let's say you have Liz Roby Miklus, she gets to second, O'Brien's on first.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much harder to steal third than it is to steal second. So more than likely, you're not going to have Liz go to third at the same time Kailee goes to second.
Right.
So at that point, you are kind of getting blocked in, but it's not by someone slow.
Right.
That's terrible. Pet peeve in softball, when you're trapped behind a slow base runner. But when you're trapped behind someone fast, it's just a matter of having faith in them and having faith in the coach.
Being trapped behind a slow base runner, is that something that your teammates had to deal with a lot when you were the leadoff batter in high school?
Oh, yes, it was terrible.
You didn't even bring up the whole all-conference team debate. I'm kind of disappointed. Were you saving that?
No, but if you want to talk about that, we can. But
yeah, we have to talk about it. We already broke the news that O'Brien was second team all-conference for the fourth consecutive year, and Roby Miklus didn't even make an all-conference team or an all-pro mention.
I think that comes down to batting average, quite frankly. Roby Miklus, while she still batted over 400, I believe Kailee was more around 420.
What defensive position? Because O'Brien's is an outfield player too, right?
Yep.
Where is she at? I forget.
She's in right field, but she was actually a
Roby
second
Miklus
baseman in
is
high school.
Center field.
Yep.
Anything to do with that?
Center field, you have a lot more expectations.
You do.
And that's kind of a role of the game. That's also how I view it, personally.
Well, and again, you were a center fielder.
Yes, but it also depends on your pitcher. Okay. So if you have a pitcher who throws a lot more outside and is super overwhelming, you might want to put your stronger I'm thinking. Left and right are they're very similar positions. They both have to learn how to play the line.
Yeah.
But it also depends on your batter. It depends on your pitcher. Because if you have a right-handed batter, your right fielder is going to see the ball the most, whereas your left fielder has to have more instincts because they don't see the ball as quickly.
That's right.
Same thing reversed.
Depends on what angle your batter is going at.
Yes.
They're going right-handed or lefty.
But it also depends on the speed of your pitcher. So if you have a pitcher who can throw outside super fast, you're going to want a strong right fielder.
Yeah.
Because more than likely that's where the ball's going to go. And you don't see a lot of balls go right up the middle on the Wartburg softball team. But Liz can cover a lot of ground, and that's why she's out in center field.
Well, in terms of who's better between Liz Roby Miklus and Kailee O'Brien, ultimately it's a completely meaningless debate because their careers are over anyway. Both were phenomenal players, and I don't feel like either of us has really proven any sort of point. We've just kind of hashed it out. But whatever your opinion is, you're completely entitled to it and enjoy holding it, even though they're not college athletes anymore.
Right.
And we'll see how team awards get sorted out as that goes on, and see how their careers progress outside of Wartburg. Wish them all the best. Last topic, we can finally talk a little bit more looking forward. We talked about our top returners already, but now with this senior class officially gone, graduated, careers over, what are our initial feelings about the softball team's quality next year? Do you think this senior class leaving is really going to hurt them?
I'm actually really excited for next year because even though you have a really strong outfield leaving, and again, Hannah Onken at first base split some time there this year.
Yeah, we can't forget her. She did have a big impression.
But other than that, it was a lot of youth on this year's team.
A lot of youth did step up.
It was, quite frankly, it was super fun to watch because these are girls that I played against.
But the batting order is going to look so different.
Yes, that's the one thing that I'm worried about. Defense.
They lost their
top two.
And their slappers as well.
Yeah.
They have a lot of younger power hitters that are going to be really, really good.
But we also have a couple. You look at Megan Ritter. She stepped in as the DH. She'll play. I believe she was a middle infielder in high school. Don't quote me on that. But we've seen her have some time in the outfield as well, depending on the situation. She's also a slapper.
Yep.
So I'd like to see her in that 1-2 spot. Again, I don't know if she can slap for power. I don't know if she's strictly a bunter.
Yeah, it just seems like we lost, not that we lost all of our slapping power, but it seems like we lost a lot of it.
Yes.
And for a team that's so small ball, like Coach Mueller wants this Wartburg team to be, they're going to fill those holes. They definitely will. It's just hard for me to see the path to filling them right now.
Right. And we also can't forget about Brenna Gray. When she's batting, she's also a slapper. So there's 3 slappers potentially in the lineup that are just gone now to graduation, which, again...
But the skills are going to be so different.
Yes.
It's one thing laying down a good slap, but having the speed of a Roby Miklus or to a lesser extent an O'Brien of getting across the base paths is almost as important.
Right.
Getting to first. Getting that acceleration up.
And I know there is a lot of speed in the dugout right now, utilized as pinch runners. I believe it was Haley Barkow.
I think so.
She's from Denver, super fast. Loved watching her out in the outfield in high school. And she was one who, she never hit for power, but she would bump from the right side. So she would be one where I would be interested to see if she gets turned into a slapper. Just for the sheer speed, quite frankly.
Yeah, and you can tell Coach Mueller is not shy about approaching athletes, asking them to start to transition into a slapper mentality.
Right.
Once again, she did that with Liz, Roby Miklus. And she's a good enough coach that she's able to convince her athletes to buy into it. And I think that's really, really good for her and for her program. And I'm sure there will be a couple of conversations going on with some of those younger players, if not now, over the summer, definitely.
Definitely. And we also don't know who's coming in next season, quite frankly.
Yeah, the recruiting class is completely up in the air. We have no info on that right now.
Right. And again, there's so much young talent, and a lot of these young talents come from very successful high school programs. So having that in, who knows, maybe we're going to get a Johnston center fielder because of Sydney Illig. We might get a center Point Urbana catcher. You just don't know a lot of that stuff.
Nope. I know nothing. Typically.
I don't know much. I've been out of the circuit so long.
Yeah, it's been so long since you played softball. Why are you even talking about this?
I don't know. I know nothing.
You have no qualifications. Gosh. Okay, moving on to this next segment. This is a little bit more reminiscing on the past year now that most Wartburg athletic campaigns are done and away with. Track and field is still going, having a lot of success, not to count them out. But the year the dust is pretty much settled for the brand new American Rivers Conference, rebranded as such after being the Iowa Conference last year and for many, many years before. So we just kind of wanted to look back on a historic first year of the ARC and what it's been like so far for this conference, which has seen so much success even after it was rebranded and almost as much success as it saw as the Iowa Conference. I mean, there's a lot of legacy carrying through.
There is, and quite frankly, I feel like the reason people were so upset is that this past season would have been the 100th year of the Iowa Conference. So you have that entire 100 years, and on the 99th year, they say this is the last year.
That's kind of tough.
So I feel like that's where a lot...
That's valid. But you look at the addition of Nebraska Wesleyan, just a couple of years ago. It's not all Iowa schools anymore. And we can speculate all we want about if there are plans to add more, but we have no schools in mind specifically that we think, all right, this university or this college is likely to transition to the ARC. But it seems unlikely that there would have been a name change just because of Nebraska Wesleyan, because they'd been here a couple of years already. So it feels like there's something in the works that we just don't know about yet, and I'd be surprised if there isn't.
I feel like there is too, and at the same time, when Wesleyan added, it was a surprise to me.
Yeah.
And while I wasn't here yet, I was definitely looking here.
Yeah.
It was kept well under wraps until it actually happened, which is the way it should be, quite frankly, coming from a PR background.
Yeah. Looking at the success of Wartburg in the new ARC, a lot of programs really still holding strong in their first season in the ARC. Talking about Wartburg men's cross country, still going strong. They're doing really. How are men's cross country doing right now? Just a quick recap. I know you want to talk about it a little bit more later.
Yes. So men's cross country back in the fall, they actually won the conference for the first time in over 10 years.
Yep.
Which huge, and then they ended up placing fifth at nationals.
Yeah.
So definitely one of the best finishes. And considering they're still a very young team, a lot of their standout stars are sophomores.
Yeah.
That's just...
It's an exciting team, exciting program. Women's basketball also achieving a lot of success in the postseason. Probably one of the coolest sports storylines this entire year, as we talked about looking at our favorite sports moments and looking back at the fall and winter sports seasons just last week. They lost in the round of Elite Eight. Football made it to the tournament once again this year. Another standout season. A great year for Matt Sasha, JoJo McNair, all included. Losing a strong senior class coming into this one, still replicating that same success. Another good year for Wartburg football and for Wartburg wrestling. Still, a sixth-place finish at Nationals is not what they're used to, but that's still technically the best finish of any Wartburg program this year.
It is.
In the postseason.
When you look at it.
Women's basketball is kind of a throw-up because
it's a four-way tie for fifth,
It's a four-way tie for fifth since you lose in the round of the Elite Eight. So let's just say the women's basketball team and the wrestling team basically finished in about the same spot in terms of, NCAA tournament action.
Right. And those two are also interesting teams to compare because it was an off year for Wartburg wrestling.
And a great year for Wartburg women's basketball.
Definitely. So
one team underachieved, the other one overachieved spectacularly.
Yes.
Both settling in about the same area of success. It just shows how amazing the Wartburg wrestling team has been in the past and how amazing the Wartburg women's basketball team is looking recently.
Right. When you still have 4 All-Americans and it's an off year, I feel like you're a really, really good program, quite frankly.
You wanted to talk a little bit about some other schools in the ARC and their impact so far in this new era of conference action.
Definitely. Specifically Loris, quite frankly. They're the team that has kind of been the thorn in Wartburg's side just this entire school year. You look at the wrestling team, and it ended up being those two fighting for the ARC Conference Championship. Wartburg came out on top. It came down to the heavyweight match, though.
Mm-hmm.
Loris also, their head coach is the son of Jim Miller, legendary Wartburg head coach.
Yeah.
So definitely you could chalk that up to Wartburg's influence on Loris anyways. Loris actually had their best finish in both women's indoor track and field and wrestling this year. Both took home trophies for their top 3 finishes, maybe top 4. Either way, just a huge success, and quite frankly, it just shows that the American Rivers Conference isn't just going away. These schools from the Iowa Conference are still competing at an extremely high quality. It's not just Wartburg.
Yeah, no, it's not, but in our minds, Wartburg will always be king.
As it should.
Last topic before we move on from the ARC and start talking a little bit more about track and field, our general opinions just on the name change. It's really pretty heated in terms of people who like it and people who don't. It feels like more people don't like it than do as of right now, though I'm sure that scale will tip as the years go by and people get used to it. Start off with you. Do you approve of the name change for the ARC? Formerly the IAAC.
I wrote an op-ed about this earlier in the year.
You did.
Quite frankly, it doesn't change anything. I mean, again, I was only here for 1 year under the Iowa Conference.
Yeah.
Both of my parents competed in the Iowa Conference. So I guess you could say I'm sort of a legacy in that manner, but it doesn't change. A school got added. Schools keep going back and forth. Wartburg, quite frankly, wasn't an original member of the Iowa Conference.
Yeah.
So
they've been a long-time member, but they weren't one of the original ones.
No, they weren't. I believe Simpson was one of the originals.
Simpson was. Not a lot of schools that are in it right now are one of the original ones.
I believe it's only 2.
Yeah.
So the fact is...
And I think Wartburg came in, 70s? Does that sound about right?
70s, 50s. I'm sure I could look it up and find it. Anyways, it was long enough ago that we don't remember it, quite frankly.
No.
But it's been all that we've ever known and all that a lot of Wartburgs...
Pretty much
students.
all of the fans, people who have the programs, have known basically their entire lives.
Yeah, but when you actually go back into it, conferences change all of the time. When I was in high school, I believe we added 2 new schools, 3 left, just in high school. So many things get shifted around just based on level of competition, who you want to be against, drive times. So I feel like changing it to the American Rivers Conference, when you consider the addition of Nebraska Wesleyan, makes sense because it sets you up for larger success and adding more schools across the Midwest.
And people know it's the same conference. It's not like we've completely switched things up and now the Iowa Conference is dead. No, it's just rebranded.
Right.
But there are a lot of people out there like, why are we going to change the name for this? It's so many Iowa fans are just like, we only added 1 Nebraska school, and now I have to rebrand the conference. This seems a little bit unnecessary.
Right, and I can definitely see that. And
it does seem a little bit unnecessary now. That's why you and I just think that there's probably more additions to come.
There has to be. Honestly, I hope so.
We've heard murmurs of that. We're not going to give out any names or any sources, but we've heard murmurs of possibilities of other schools being added from pretty good sources. So, we'll just see how it develops. Not to say that it's going to happen, not to say that it's not going to happen, but it's looking more like it is.
Definitely, and this also isn't the first rebrand that the conference has gone under, quite frankly. It's definitely... American Rivers Conference is a large change from Iowa Conference. It used to be the Iowa Intercollegiate Athletic Association.
Yeah.
And then, so, more of a name shortage than anything else.
Yeah, I still call it the IIAC.
Yeah. That's what it is. And then, yeah.
I guess.
I have up the history right now.
As broadcasters, it was kind of when we went into our training to start this year, it was, don't say Iowa Conference anymore. We had to go through a whole segment about how we have to always say American Rivers Conference and how we can abbreviate it to make it shorter.
Yep.
And that was an entertaining part of this year.
It was. Wartburg came into the conference in 1936 after the conference had been made in 1922. So, and we were talking about the original schools. The ones who are the originals that are still here are actually Buena Vista, Central, and Simpson.
Nice.
Yeah, so...
all good schools.
It's an interesting argument, quite frankly.
At least it's not Luther. Luther wasn't one of the original ones. They can't hold that over us.
Actually, Luther was. I just missed them.
Oh, dang it, Annika.
I'm sorry.
All right, let's move on from this. Now I'm mad. All right, now a quick update. The last active sport, track and field is the last active sport, right?
Yeah.
For Wartburg Athletics. The last active sport, track and field, still going. Season's still alive, still raising the Wartburg banner high and proud. Annika, fill us in on everything track and field. You put up a little list. You want to talk about it? Let's do it.
I did. So coming into currently Saturday is the last day of competition, so we're going to see how everything shakes up. But as of Thursday and Friday's results, the women were in first.
Yep.
Excuse me.
You're good.
So definitely super exciting, especially when you're competing against Loras and Wesleyan, who are both nationally ranked. And quite frankly, they have a ton of good athletes.
Right.
Love watching them. Even though I don't like cheering for them. Don't cheer for them. Cheer for Wartburg all the time. But just kind of recapping some conference champions from Friday, we had Riley Barrett take first in the decathlon. He finished second a year ago, only a sophomore. And again, another guy who we were in the same conference in high school, so I've seen him run for 6 years before even coming to, college.
Yeah.
But he didn't compete in half of the events in the decathlon before coming here. So definitely exciting to just see that actually happen. The women's 4x8 relay won. Wartburg actually swept the 10K, both men and women, and the long jump, both men and women. So
yeah,
definitely huge. And then multiple events have qualified for today's finals. We had 200 hurdlers on the women's side and then all 4 high hurdlers on the men's side.
Today's finals, we're recording this secondary segment on Saturday.
Yes.
That's what she means by this.
Yes, sorry. And then 2 in the 400-meter dash, just a ton. And so in track and field, you can enter 4 runners per event in outdoor. That's just how it works.
Yep.
So between both men and women, you can enter 8. So in the 800, out of all 8, only 1 didn't make finals.
Wow.
So just quite frankly huge. A ton of 400 hurdlers making it. Yeah, it's just been, I'm excited to see how the rest of it shakes up.
You've had firsthand knowledge of Coach Newsom's methods throughout the track and field season. What do you think he does, or what are some of the things he does that makes him so successful and able to crank out these kind of under-the-radar successful seasons? Because a lot of people don't pay a lot of attention to track and field, but his consistency making it a really good program is pretty impressive.
Yes, and it helps with the recruits that he gets, honestly. Back in, I believe it was 2012, in that era, he had a set of twins from Chicago. Their dad knew Coach Newsom and said, my daughters are going to run for you.
Okay.
So he got those two. Both were national champions.
Nice.
Both ran on the 4x4. One was a national champion in the open 400.
Good.
The other one was, I don't know if she was a national champion, but I know she was consistently an All-American in the jumps, long jump and triple jump. Both just extremely successful. Both were extremely successful, but and once you have that kind of program built, it's so easy to keep people filtering in. I believe he had a UNI recruit end up transferring to Wartburg just because of the success that the program had. My cousin came here, found a lot of success. That's how I kind of learned about Wartburg track and field, was through her. But once you build that program and get a couple good recruits, it's so easy to keep it built up. And again, practices are hard. He doesn't make it easy for you. He knows how to crank out some really, really talented athletes. And
I marvel at the way he changes so many people's archetypes when it comes to running. And I mean, that's pretty, it's a common skill that all those coaches have to have, especially when it comes to optimizing your speed and realizing that as these people are going through puberty and adulthood, their bodies are going to change a lot, especially on the female side as they're entering the 18, 19 age range. A lot of stuff is going to get switched up with hips, and with men, it's kind of the same thing, not as severe. But I really do admire his ability to have athletes change, sometimes even events, distances, and still be successful.
Definitely, and you look at Riley Barrett as a decathlon, extremely athletic individual, didn't compete in a lot of. He wasn't a discus thrower in high school. He didn't throw the shot. They didn't have javelin and pole vault. He wasn't a mile runner. He was a 400 hurler.
Yeah.
But because he was so athletic, it's a matter of just teaching him those skills. And quite frankly, he's found a lot of success.
Any last thoughts on track and field?
Go Knights.
Go Knights. Go Knights all season long. Well, that's all the time we're going to have for this week. If you enjoyed this week's edition of From the Booth, please let us know. Give us that like on Facebook. Feel free to reach out to us. Pop us a message. As always, we'd love to hear from you. We'll be back next week with some more baseball content. Whatever else we can crank out. Should have a very special guest as well. That one's still in the works, though, so we won't give it away just yet. But do listen in, for sure. Pleasure having you. Anik and I will see you next week